Millions of children are educated every day in a myriad of settings. Homeschool, public school, private school, charter schools, online academies, learning pods, private tutoring, and more. Why are so many families transitioning to homeschooling? What advantages have they found? What unique challenges do they face? What have they learned, and how can listening to their experiences support your child's education? These are their stories. Together, we learn. This is the Edvantage. Hello, fellow educators, and thank you for listening. I'm Todd Michael, creator and host of the Edvantage. Today's guest is Chrissy Barco of the popular Instagram account A Little Glam, A Lot of Mom, and YouTube channel of the same name. Chrissy is a wife, homemaker, mom, and home educator to 5 children, ages 5 to 17 years old. She describes herself as a naturalist wannabe raising naturalist children and believes she was created for motherhood. In her own words, her life's work is in the soul of her children and the soil of the garden. Chrissy's spiritual being is rooted in Christ and nature. Naturally, that reflects onto her physical being. She's happiest in the wake of a slow morning, awing at wild things, sharing a meal with her family, and sitting among a pile of books. As Chrissy's creative outlet, she runs her YouTube platform where she shares her love of homemaking, home education, books, and nature. I hope you enjoy this thoughtful and reflective interview. Okay, Chrissy, welcome to the Edvantage. It's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
I'm especially excited to get into your homeschooling approach and some of the nitty-gritty. You have a good range of experience with homeschooling young ones and homeschooling teenagers, and I think there's a lot that we can learn from you. I want to start on a little bit lighter note. I'd love to hear a little bit about how you settled on your Instagram handle and what meaning it has to you, because it's a fun one. I'm intrigued to know more about it.
Sure. So it actually didn't start as a homeschooling platform. I was in the pit of motherhood when I opened up this Instagram account. I just had my 5th child, exclusively breastfeeding, attachment parenting, and I'd finally just found my groove. I was feeling like myself. I was
Sure.
dabbling into makeup a little bit, and I just wanted to share that encouragement with other mothers, hence the name A Little Glam, but a lot of mom. A Little Glam, a lot of mom came with the
Right.
handle. And then that was the year where I started doing preschool at home with one of my children. And so as home education just merged and, influenced my motherhood and life, that handle evolved as well. And then I found a huge outpour of online community and encouragement in the homeschool community. And I wanted to be part of that. It was a privilege to be part of that and to share and just feel like we're doing it all together.
Right. Now, did the Instagram account come first and then the YouTube channel after? Is that the right order?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
And so as I started posting snippets of our homeschooling day on Instagram, I just started getting feedback of, "Ooh, I'd love to see more and know more." And that's
Right.
when YouTube came about. And I have some really OG YouTube videos of again, my youngest back then, she wasn't even 1. She was just crawling and tagging along.
Yeah. Wow. So that's really cool and really interesting. And I think the great thing about, the way you describe it is starting out with motherhood and merging into homeschooling is that really is the crux of homeschooling. Like it's very, very much is a extension of our parenting. And whether you're a homeschool mom, a homeschool dad, whether you're the one full-time, contact with the kids, or maybe you're working outside the home and supporting it in other ways, for all of us, when we choose to homeschool, it becomes an extension of our approach to parenting, and they really are interwoven. It's hard to separate the two. So I appreciate you highlighting that. What was your educational experience like? Your schooling like? What stands out? What were some of the challenges? What did you love about it? Tell us a little bit about that.
So it was there. I was a public school student. I attended a fair amount of public schools in our area in South Florida. My
Hmm.
mother was a single mom, and so we moved often. And I'm also the daughter of immigrants. I'm a first generation Latin American. And so, with that, I faced some hurdles and challenges, like full-time working parents, just hard
Sure.
laborers and survivors, trying to establish a foundation here in this country. And then they had their language barrier, and so that resulted in zero school involvement on their behalf.
Mm,
Uh, and so there was always this huge disconnection. There's also these like cultural generational expectations and pressure. So our grandparents and our parents paved the way, right? And they afforded us or me the opportunity to be an American. They did
right.
that like the work, right? And I'm eternally grateful and I honor that story and our family history. But the rest is left for us, just our first generation Americans, to figure out on our own as they're again working hard and possibly even dealing with their own trauma from being uprooted, cultural shock. So there
Right.
was just always this big disconnection, is what I'm trying to convey here, between education and home. I wasn't coming
Right.
home to a family of readers. Nobody was opening a book. We're not discussing American history or English literature at the table. Our parents are telling us that we need to love and honor this country and seize the land of opportunity, and they're modeling that to us. But again,
Hmm.
just that huge disconnection. Our home life is just this huge Hispanic Colombian family and community, and finding comfort in other immigrants and in um, other people in the Hispanic community, our friends, coworkers, church, and just really never
Right.
leaving the customs and religion and language. And so besides a public school guidance counselor, there was no one that was able to advocate for my education or guide me.
Hmm.
I was also an only child for a long time. I come from divorced parents, and eventually they went off and formed, new families or secondary families. But for a long time, I was the oldest and the only child, and so I had no older sibling footsteps to follow or no mentor. So,
Right. Wow.
and actually answering your question, as a young child, I was very curious and hungry for education, and then somehow that spark went out in my teen years. I found myself just checking the box,
Hmm.
and my motivator was to not fail my family, to not let them down. um,
Sure.
not this not this intrinsic desire to be a life learner. And so I checked the boxes. I got good grades until that motivator just, that's not sustainable. And by now I'm a teenager and trying to find myself in my place in the world. And so, yeah, while my family didn't cultivate a love for books and math and academics, they did cultivate other things that were big advantages, like hard work ethic and family bonds. And
Sure.
that's, watching the men in our family and in our community lead and provide. And then I grew up under my abuela, and watching her just be a relentless and fierce and humble homemaker and mother and
Right.
serving God, I then just fell enamored with that idea. And in the Hispanic culture, it's very normal to have children at a young age. And so I wanted that. I wanted to be a mother so badly, and I became a teen mom. And so that's where education, at least academics, ended for me,
Sure.
because then I had to step into this role of motherhood. But that's a whole other testimony.
Sure. Well, and I appreciate that you make that distinction between education and schooling. And I talk about this
Yeah,
often, and there's absolutely a clear distinction for me between formal schooling and our education. And oftentimes, what we learn through life experience and through doing is so much more valuable than kind of this preparatory schooling that a lot of us go through. And so, yeah, that, as you well put it, like that may have been the end of that level of education, but here you are then learning all of these lessons of motherhood and all that life has to offer. I am so
absolutely.
intrigued by this, piece about you not really living in a house where books were valued or where literature was discussed or where that was part of your family's, the way you spent your time, and yet
Hmm.
looking at the way that you are educating your children and the way you live your life now, it's clear that that has become a central part of who you are, and
Yes.
a huge piece of what you want to make sure that your children have. I mean, so much of your content is around books and literature, and how you can utilize those to educate your children. And I know that's one of your favorite things to do, is to,
Mhm.
be surrounded by books. What was that process like for you, in terms of falling in love with, and kind of like embracing literature and books, when it wasn't necessarily something that was given to you? You sought it out yourself. How did you discover that?
Well, I think it was in now my I call it my like second phase of motherhood with like
Hmm.
I explained, I was a teen mom with my oldest two. And then I had the opportunity to be a stay-at-home mom with my third daughter. And I wanted to off something that I didn't have and I always saw in other families and possibly even friends at school. I wanted to pass that on to my own kids.
Hmm.
And so I started that at a very young age with my now third child. Soon as she was born, it was, let's get all the books and let's read some stories and let's do a little bit of learning every day. And that was what opened up my mind and my heart to home educating the children.
And so, in that process of, becoming the educator, I'm sure you also were learning a lot. And I'm
I
curious,
still
and
absolutely,
still are, of course.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm curious, what were some of the ideas around homeschooling, or maybe misconceptions, or just some of the things that you had in mind about homeschooling, that as you experienced it, either changed, or things that you were able to discover. What was your mindset beforehand, and how has that changed since?
Well, I can think I can speak for a lot of us when I say that we're, as parents, and especially of the younger children, we're just obsessed with like the alphabet. We're obsessed with, yeah, just the curriculum and the academics and the rigor. And then I actually came to discover that, and I got comfortable with the idea that home education is so much more than that.
Right.
Um, yeah, it's more than academics. It's relationship, it's mentorship, it's discipleship. That's a big one for us. Life
Sure.
skills, really a true balance of head, heart, and hands. And so that was an unexpected challenge for me personally because I wanted to tap into that natural instincts again of honoring the child, head, heart, and hands. But then I had
Hmm.
this of being behind, and if I don't push this curriculum or if we don't sit for hours, noses in studies and in books.
Right.
And then I found I was falling into that comparison mindset, of comparing my kids to other children and other families, a lot of public schoolers. Um,
Sure.
for 3 years of our home educating life or journey, my older children were still attending Department of Defense schools. We're a military family.
Hmm.
And so I was still dismissing them for a few years. Every day I was having these beautiful connections with my younger kids, and they were. So I was also comparing my like, wow, my public school kids, they just seem to have so much memorized and so much rigor, and we're moving
Right.
so slowly. But in turn, I was missing out in the goodness of it all because of that fear of falling behind,
Yeah,
because the goodness is not in the rigor and the in the academics
right.
and in the homeschool resources. That's not where the goodness of this life is. Yeah.
Yes, and so well said. And I've drilled this before, and anyone who's listened to previous episode is probably sick of hearing me say this, but when you look at the actual cognitive demand, like what is challenging to a child's mind, the lowest level is memorization, like rote memorization of facts. And the
Hmm.
highest levels are creativity and synthesizing, putting ideas together. And so you look at most traditional school settings, and what do they value? What do they spend most of their time on? And it really is that low level stuff, because it's the most accessible. So you can get kids to memorize a lot of information and regurgitate it, and it looks impressive. I
Hmm.
totally relate to that mindset, because as a homeschooler myself, I would go through that all the time as a kid. Like I'd have friends who, could rattle off these things. And I remember when I was memorizing the states and their capitals, it was really hard for me. And I had friends who could do it and they were in public school. And I remember thinking like, it must just be because, public school is teaching them better. I'm just dumb or whatever. And then you look at homeschooling and you see, well, what is available and how can children spend most of their time? And it actually is the things that are the most cognitively demanding, creating and synthesizing and comparing and contrasting all of these higher level processes that draw so much more out of a child than just saying, hey, here's a list of information, memorize it, repeat it back to me once you've had it memorized, and we'll move to another list.
Sure. Absolutely.
Now, when you got into homeschooling and you said, there was kind of this period where it was half and half. At what point did you become full-time homeschooling all of your children?
I would be about our third year into homeschooling. Like I said, I felt this huge disconnection. A big part of the reason why we decided to homeschool was also I just it felt wrong that my children were going through their childhood separated. I have five
Right.
children. We have one gap between the teens and the younger ones, but the two older teens are good friends, and then the three younger ones, and it felt wrong for all of them to go in all different directions,
Mm-hmm.
and it felt wrong that I wasn't protecting their childhood.
Right.
And so there was a period, a good year and a half, where I prayed, and I talked it over with my husband, and we prayed
Mm-hmm.
over the hearts of our children, because by now they're in middle school. They're right in the middle of those grades. And so all they knew was, saying goodbye to mom in the morning, and coming back. And I was at home when they'd come home from school. But at that point, it was 4 or 5 in the evening, and it
Right.
was dinner, and it was homework, and it was extracurriculars. And then, do it again the next day. And that was just, it was really sad. And I felt that we were divided. And so again, we prayed that over their hearts, and they were like, you know what, let's give it a chance. I agree. We should be a unit. I mean, as a big family, we thrive on teamwork. That's the only way it gets done.
Sure.
And this was just really, it felt natural to do so. And so we did that. We went through the whole deschooling process for like a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
And here we are now. And now we have high schoolers, and we're never looking back. Every year we come back, and we evaluate. Is this what you want? What are your goals? What do you want for your education? And up until now, it's nope, we're staying home. This is the life that we want. So
That's great. And that's a great
that's
practice. I always recommend that to people. Like I think one of the most intimidating things for parents is feeling like they have to make a final decision and stick to it when it comes to really anything with their kids, but especially their child's education. And I'm of the, strong mindset that you take it year by year, and sometimes even within a year, you might need to make a change. But most certainly, you don't have to say, hey, all of my kids are all going to do the same thing for all of their education. Sometimes one child is going to need something different. Sometimes at a different age and stage in their lives, they're going to need to shift. Even as a homeschool family, you're going to need to adjust and change approaches and maybe have a different approach for each kid. And that's all good. That's a feature, not a bug. And so I appreciate you highlighting that, because a lot of families, I think, just out of fear, they get kind of stuck in a rut and they don't want to change, or they don't know how to change. And then that doesn't help anybody. It just makes everyone a little more stressed and pressured.
Yeah, it's an ebb and flow, and it's honoring your children for who they are right now, and
Right.
especially, my teens, they're basically in their young adult lives, and so I have to honor that as well. But by just living and modeling, this life of learning altogether, that we do, I think that that's why they've chosen to continue this path as well. Like I said, it's
Right.
just really just such a natural unfolding.
Now you've been a mom for plenty of years, and it's certainly
17 years, 17 years.
wow. Okay, so
I
there's
know.
a good chunk of time, and you have
Oh,
not
yeah.
been a homeschool mom for that whole time. And so I'm curious,
Right.
how has homeschooling impacted your approach to motherhood?
Um, It has had influence in, again, going back to how I honor each child,
Hmm.
right? Seeing them for who they are right now. Um, and again, this goes back to not expecting them to be who I want them to be as their mother and as their
Mm,
guide and their role model. Like I know that being at home is the right thing for you, but we have to again honor who they are and more honor who God is shaping them to be. We don't know that plan,
right.
right? And so it's taught me to yes honor their characteristics, their skills, their talents, their interests, their dreams, and then in honoring them, I have to study them. Right, I have to know them
Hmm.
in each phase and know each phase and just that's just such a privilege and it's such a beautiful thing to study my children and yeah just know them inside and out. I mean as they're evolving I'm right there. I'm getting to witness that and see that
Right.
and so that has been the biggest way that homeschooling has influenced or impacted my motherhood is just honoring them for who they are.
And that's such a valuable realization, and I think an underappreciated benefit to homeschooling is that you are there for
Yes.
all of it. You're not kind of catching these glimpses. It saddens me so much when I hear parents say, maybe the wording changes a little, but they expressed the concern. I never know what's going on in my kid's life, or my kid never wants to talk to me about their life.
Hmm.
And you don't usually hear that from homeschool families. It often is parents of teenagers, and often teenagers who are in public school, and the time together just isn't there. And I think
Hmm.
it's kind of like any relationship, a husband and wife, or even as adults with your friends. If you don't have that much face time with somebody, it is hard to keep in contact with them, and to keep close with them. It's like you may still have fond feelings for them, or appreciate them, or have memories that you cherish, but the bond is most effectively strengthened by that time together, and that consistent time
Yes,
together. And you
absolutely.
hit the nail on the head, in my opinion. It as far as motherhood or fatherhood, whichever parent is home with them, for the most part, you get that opportunity to be there for all those moments, all those precious changes, and that metamorphosis. And
Hmm.
in the end, you are able to be such a strong influence on them, rather than just kind of getting those glimpses here or there as time passes over the years.
Yeah. And there are too many benefits to homeschooling, at least from my humble opinion, right? I can ramble on and on about that. But yes, with in my personal perspective, going that route,
Hmm.
yes, that's the biggest benefit is I have the best seat in the house to the greatest show in town and it's their childhood. Really I'm not missing a beat. Like I said, there, there's these huge transitions from season to season and age to age, and I'm there parenting in real time. Nothing is really a surprise because I'm watching the unfolding. And so I have time to lay down this foundation before they're off wandering too far, and trying to find themselves in the world. And again, that goes hand in hand with preserving childhood. So that's just a huge benefit, the biggest in my opinion.
Right. Yeah. So well said. That's the heart of it right there.
Yeah.
Now, there are a lot of families who, are looking for those benefits, or maybe they've started, but they're not sure about it yet. They're not sold on homeschooling.
Mhm.
Or I imagine we've got plenty more who are considering coming on board now that school has started for this school year, and their kids are in public school or private school or charter school, whatever the case may be. And they're kind of on that fence, like, maybe we should homeschool. I'm not sure. What advice do
Yes,
you
do it.
have? That is succinct. Show is over.
Yeah.
Yeah, just do it, guys.
Yeah,
But yeah,
go in.
for those who are like, on that fence, what I mean, is it really that simple? Is it just like, try it and you'll see?
Absolutely not. It's definitely a leap of faith,
Yeah,
right? And I'm no expert at all. So I think that the best thing that I can do is just humbly share my experience and what better way to start than with my mistakes.
sure.
And I'll go back to the biggest mistake I made as a homeschooling mom was that idea, just falling for that idea that homeschooling is more, it is about the, academics and the enrichments and the books and the resources. And it's not. The life-giving goodness is found in the process. So I would say, or my advice would be maybe just delighting in the process and trusting that process more
Mm,
rather than trying to race, or look towards the end result. I think most of us, or one of the reasons why we choose to home educate, most of us homeschooling parents, we want to just cultivate lifelong learners. And a
right,
life of learning actually looks very much like just living, you know
right.
so making those connections and not rushing through the everyday stuff like preparing and sharing meals and not rushing through mornings. We like to start our morning with something we call the happiness block. And for my
Mm,
younger kids, that's just a lot of free play. For my older children, it could be maybe even catching up on a series or reading a book or just being in the kitchen and fooling around with each other as siblings do, and just delighting in the process of doing life together, because when you do that, the learning just, it naturally happens.
hmm.
So yep, that's my biggest advice, is just delighting in the process, and everything else, if you're happy and um if you're feeling inspired, right? And so then again, naturally all the goodness will come your way. But yeah,
Right.
just enjoying the everyday, the ordinary moments. So many connections are made in those ordinary moments. I always say this, like, I get questions of, oh, 5 kids, how do you make time for one-on-one
Right.
time, or how do you connect with each one individually? And I tell everyone, it's not like these big movie scene moments that, some of us think like it
Right.
has to be a daddy daughter date, or, I
Yeah.
have to, yes, you do have to find common interests, with your children, and possibly even bring them into your world, and, bring yourself a little bit into their world. But it's not those perfectly curated moments. It's the ordinary, the everyday. Right now, I'm giving my teenagers driving lessons,
Mm.
and that's scary. And my Ooh, but we have so much fun just driving to the record store together, and
Right.
looking through these used records, or driving over to the gas station to get Slurpees. And it's in those little moments, everyday moments in the car, where my kids are opening up to me, and again, just making those big connections.
And that's so rare these days. I think that a lot of families have allowed technology and overly impacted schedules and just so many other factors
Hmm.
take away a lot of those would be moments, those
Yes.
small opportunities to connect. And so that advice is so valuable because a lot of those fond childhood memories are created in those small in between moments.
Hmm.
It's not the big family vacation off to some faraway place and all of that. Now those are good too, and those can of course happen, but you're absolutely right. It's those little things, those little times, and savoring them. I know for me, one of the biggest shifts in my approach to my time with my kids and my fatherhood is not thinking of what would I rather be doing or what else could I be doing with my time that's maybe more valuable and more productive, or all of these labels that we add on, but really realizing my kids and really helping others in general is what I was given my time for. Like that is why I am on the earth, why I have a life in the first place.
Hmm.
And God's not going to have me stand accountable for how much money I made or how many likes my social media posts got or any of these other metrics that can be so distracting. It's going to be
Yes.
how did you spend your time and how did you care for the ones around you? And so when my daughter, wants me to give her a piggyback ride or go like just these simple things that would be really easy to overlook or really easy to kind of brush off as not important. I
Hmm.
I've been trying so much harder since I kind of made that mental shift to make them important, to enjoy them and relish them and help her enjoy them and relish them and realize that when she asks me, she can trust that the answer will be, yes, I want to play with you, or yes, let's do this. And, same for my sons. It's across the board. So you're absolutely right. That's
And
key.
I love that you say that. And it's, yes, it's making yourself available for them. When they know that you are just absolutely 100% available, they find those little like nooks and crannies throughout the day, right? To
Yeah.
to open you and to connect. Absolutely.
And I think it's so much more satisfying. I've done it both ways. Like, I've had times where I was working one full-time and three part-time jobs. And so, I only could see my kids for little slivers of time on the weekends, and it had to be
Hmm.
really rigid or really scheduled. And sometimes the pressure became so high in those moments that it almost took the fun out of it, right? Because it was like, we only have an hour to see each other. Let's do
Yes.
all it. And you kind
Yeah.
of overblow it. And so,
Right.
whatever the amount of time you have, it's important to let those things be a little more authentic, a little more natural and relaxed, and the good will come. I'm curious, you mentioned you're a military family, and I'm curious how, because not surprisingly, I'm big on talking about homeschool dads, and whatever role that is, whether it's the one who's with the kids every day, whether it's
Yeah.
the one who's providing the income so that mom can be the one with them, whether it's providing support and feedback or helping plan and prepare, whether it's adding supplemental activities such as learning new skills or going on different adventures. There are so many ways that dads can, and in my opinion should, be involved. So what does that look like in your home?
Well, you mean as far as my husband, what his role is
Yeah,
in,
what exactly?
you
What how does he fit into kind of, because you have your homeschooling, that's like the formal things that you have planned, but then there's just the general education, the development of your kids, and the time that he's able to spend with them. How does that factor in?
well, I think it starts with uh, honoring the part that he has in that. Like you said, there are different roles, whether it's being the provider or and honoring that his role and honoring my role and even the kids in the equation because, like I said, we're
Right,
we're a big team.
right.
Um, yeah, I mean he has, for example, when he'll have a random day off during the week, and it's like throw all the plans out the window, dad's home, he's the fun guy. And so he and I used to worry about that, like for example when COVID hit, and he was working remote.
Hmm.
It was just a whole year of learning life skills. We were outside so much, and he was teaching the kids how to fish, and we were
Mm,
just doing projects together, and we started gardening. And so I think his role has been in influencing and reminding me that, again, there is so many learning opportunities outside of the books and
right.
just in every day. Yeah, that's definitely him. He's finding, and he doesn't make it like, we're going out in nature and we're learning so many things. No, it's just
Right.
it's really an organic thing of, let's go outside and let's be still and let's observe and let's see what we
Yeah.
find. And he's an adventurer as well, so he's taught us, and the children, how to forage. And again, he's big in the garden with us, and he's a surfer, so he gives them
Mm,
surf lessons. We live in a beach town, so that's been a
yeah.
big thing. um, yeah, to opening bank accounts, to driving lessons. I mean,
Right.
his role is, he's the heart and leader of our household for sure.
And I appreciate you talking about that, and I hope that those listening have gleaned some ideas in terms of how to honor homeschool dads, because I think all too often it does get kind of forgotten, or people think of just well, which parent is the main contact, and in many cases it is the mom, and so they kind of focus there. And I think there's underutilized and sometimes underappreciated moments that, or aspects of each kid's learning, that really are so valuable and so important. And, for me as a growing up with a single mom, I didn't have those. And so it's a huge
Mm,
contrast for me. Like when I see those little moments that I'm able to give to my kids, and when I see
mhm,
other families where, dads are able to be involved, like I notice all of them because I remember noticing them as a kid and wishing I had them, wishing somebody could teach me to fish, or wishing, somebody could take me for, and there were other men around, and I did have some experiences that were, so valuable to me.
mhm.
But I think a lot of times it's easy to overlook or easy to forget. And so thank you for honoring that, and for sharing some of that. Now, your Instagram and your YouTube channel are so rich with examples of, not just your approach, but you do a great job of representing, here's how I do it, but generally here are the ideas, here are the concepts. Like you're so transparent, and I really appreciate that. Talk to us, for
Thank
those who maybe are unfamiliar with your content. Share a little bit about what you post, kind of your goals with each. You could maybe go, one at a time. You could talk about Instagram, then about YouTube, or if it's easier to do them together, I'll let you decide. But what can people expect to find, and what are some of your goals with those? I know it's a creative outlet for you, but
It
obviously
is.
you could just go paint a painting and stick it in a closet and it wouldn't help anybody. So there's other layers that are helping us and helping other families. So please let us know what you do with that.
So I think I've had to reflect on, I have to reflect on this from time to time, like what is my place in this space, right?
Right.
And so I think that the general theme or idea is that we already chose to live freely. We chose freedom when we chose education, and we
Mhm.
chose homemaking. And so, live that way. You already chose freedom, and so live like it. And so on
Mm.
YouTube, my content really, it's mostly exclusively homeschooling content, and it's just showing how we can step outside of those boxes, of those checklists, because even just because you chose homeschooling, you can still very much fall into the mold, right,
Right.
of the curriculum and buying all the things, and again all these checklists. And so
Yeah.
I like to share how and in our learning process and in our journey of transitioning to that as well, just getting to the true essence of what life learning is. There's no start time, there's no end time to learning. And so just sharing
Hmm.
ways of learning through play and through nature studies and again, everyday life, math in the kitchen with cookbooks, and a lot of the beginning early reader type of memorizing sight words and phonetic sounds, and all of that is just through reading every single day, just reading out loud to your kids, or having them sit next to you and follow along as you're reading with them or they're reading to you. And so just that, not necessarily unschooling, because I've made the mistake of putting myself in that box before, and I was quickly called
Right.
out. But I think just a more natural, again, unfolding of learning, and again, stepping outside of that homeschooling box, because there could be one, and you can fall into it. I know I did at the very beginning. So,
That's a
and
great
so
point.
that's for YouTube. And then on Instagram, it is a lot of homeschooling content, but more a personal perspective as well.
Hmm.
Like you said, my love for books, my love for nature, a lot of the projects that we have going on, a peek into our big family life, and unapologetic encouragement for women and mothers to be homemakers, because
Hmm.
we need that. We need an uproar.
Amen to that. My wife has been a long time aspiring stay-at-home mom. When we were dating, it was very clear, that was one of the first conversations we had, was like, is this something you want to do, and is this something you want to support? Like, my question for her was, are you willing to focus full time on being a mom? And her, questions for me were, are you willing to provide a living so that I can focus full time on being a mom?
That's so
And it
funny. I had that same conversation with my husband. I was like, please be ready to be the provider, because I am staying
right.
our babies. Yeah.
Right. And it was funny because for us, like that had been a goal for each of us in our separate lives
Hmm.
for, as long as we could remember. And so once we started dating and fell in love and got married, like it was such a natural thing for us. There was never a question about whether that was our priority. But
Hmm.
as you well point out, it is becoming so rare, and so many people are allowing other priorities, especially, I mean, and I don't mean any disrespect to people, because I know that some folks are, single parents, some folks are living in, I mean, we just moved out of California, and the cost of living there is just skyrocketed.
Oh,
It's
I can imagine.
insanity. And so I
Yep.
get that there are things that come into your life that throw off your priorities, but
Yes.
generally speaking, there's a lot of misplaced priorities where people think, hey, I have to
Hmm.
provide this standard of living, like this, you know, um, certain threshold of things that I can buy and things that we can do. And it all
Hmm.
comes down to how much income we have. And so they'll go for, two full-time incomes, and then it starts to choke out the homemaking. But
Yeah.
it's such a stark contrast for the quality of life, for the time and attention you can give to your kids, and especially with the homeschool setting. Like there are families that can pull it off where both parents are working, and hats off to them. I'm impressed by it every
Yes.
time I see it. That being said, it is so much more, it's such a more natural fit when you can have that full day to pull from.
Yes.
And so thank you for your advocacy. I guess my long-winded comment is that I agree and I appreciate you, because there's a need for it. There's really a need for it.
Absolutely. And society doesn't see it in a sensational form. But that doesn't mean that it isn't. It's actually absolutely needed, and it's the Lord's work. And it took me a while to to finally realize that, right? I mean, I was already a
Hmm.
stay-at-home mom. I was already homeschooling the kids, but there was always this pull, or these whispers, right, from the outside, like, you should be doing more, you should be contributing more, you should have, certain things that just belong to you, your name, right,
Right.
independently. Until one day, I couldn't take the battle anymore. Like I said, I always dreamed of being a mom. That's all that I wanted. I didn't, and there are people that do, and that's totally okay, but I didn't want this career. I
Hmm.
wanted mom. And so I was always just battling, like, this is what I've always wanted. Why do I still not feel, I guess, fulfilled,
Hmm.
or okay with that role? Until one day I was on my knees, and I said, Lord, just, do with me what you want and what you need, and the work that you need in your kingdom. And I think that from then on, it was my conviction then, and confidence that I was made for such a time like this.
That's so powerful. That is so powerful. Thank you for sharing that. It's a rare uh, situation that, you know people get to find what they feel is their calling in life.
Hmm.
And yet I've seen it so much more often with mothers than really any other career or field, and I mean among men or women. Like there are a lot of people pursuing a lot of things,
Hmm.
and there's a lot of kind of still that unfulfilled emptiness that
Yes.
follows them along their pursuit. And yet with motherhood, the most fulfilled people in their role that I've come across are, mothers and fathers who are all in, who've decided this is what my time is for, and nothing else can become more important. There are other obligations, there are other responsibilities. I don't have to close myself off to the world, but as
Right.
far as priorities, these kids, this right here, this is number one.
Yes, I mean, it's what we were created for. It's just,
Right.
it's so natural. And the lies of, we should be separated, or we should seek more or go for more, always more.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's just, it's not true. And so yes, that's, I unapologetically, like I said, preach that, and speak it into the lives of other women. And like you said, I understand there are some situations where you can't, as a single mom, or, now just keeping up with the demands of the cost of living. I get it. But
Right.
if you can, I'm here to encourage you and to cheer you on in any way that I can.
Yeah. And sometimes it comes down to priorities. Like, we were
Absolutely.
in California and it was really tight on one income. And so it got to the point where it was, well, let's move across the country. And here we are now
Mhm.
living in Northwest Arkansas, and the cost of living is significantly lower and we can get by on much less. And, we could have been stubborn and said, oh, well, we want to live here. We grew up here. We need to stay here. So now, my
Mhm.
wife has to go back to work, and we're going to put our kids in school and all these things. And so it does sometimes come down to priorities. And if
Absolutely.
that's your top priority, there's often, not always, but often you can find a way to still keep that. And if it's not your top priority, you can almost always find an excuse to justify not doing it. And so it
Yes.
really comes down to what you want, what you really truly are striving for, and the Lord will provide if you have your priorities in line with his.
Yes, absolutely. Amen to that.
Well, Chrissy, this has been such a pleasure. I've learned so much from you in the time we've talked. I'm sure that those listening will glean so much. Go ahead and share, just before we go. Please share again your. I guess it's the same for both, but your Instagram and YouTube channel, and anywhere else that they can find you, or any other offers you have or promotions or anything you want to share.
Yep, on YouTube it's a little glam, a lot of mom all together, and on Instagram it's a little glam, a lot man. I'm so sorry, tongue twisted here. A little glam, a lot of mom underscore in the middle there of to separate the both phrases.
Okay,
And yeah, I'm working on some new projects, and hopefully to make more connections and community with more families and mothers out there. So that'll be soon to come. But as of right now, yep,
great.
that's where you can find me.
Well, thank you so much again for your time, and thank you for being such a strong advocate for motherhood, for homemaking, and for bringing that intentionality to your homeschooling approach. I know that you've already inspired so many. You have a really strong following on Instagram, and especially on YouTube. It's so great to see your videos doing so well, because it clearly resonates what you are standing for and standing up for with your faith, with your family. It's needed. The world is hungry for it, and I am
Yeah,
so thankful that you are here to give it to so many, because it's it's the most important message that you can be sharing. So thank you for that, and thank you for your time today.
I appreciate it, Todd. Thank you so much.
That was Chrissy Barco, wife, homemaker, mom, home educator, YouTube influencer, and appreciator of little moments. If you like what you heard today, please take a moment to give our podcast a positive rating and review, and be sure to share it with the other parents and educators in your life. If you want to take the guesswork out of homeschooling while saving yourself time and money, head over to homesschooledvantage.com and check out our free resources. And consider becoming a member to unlock your access to the most comprehensive training available for homeschool parents. Their education begins with you. You can join the conversation by connecting with me on Twitter and Instagram at Todd K. Michael, Facebook and YouTube, Homeschool Edvantage, and at homesschooledvantage.com. That's homesschooledvantage with an E.com. Links to all in the show notes. Thank you for joining us. Bye, everybody.